Welcome to this Tybootha presentation, where we will explore the threats of hell and hopes of paradise through the lens of the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám of Naishapur.
And a big thank you, as always, to James Michael, our producer. He's the one who curated all this fascinating material for our deep dive today.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So we're plunging right into these, timeless verses of Omar Khayyám. Our mission today is pretty sharp, pretty clear. We want to extract the really potent insights from the source material that James shared. And we're focusing specifically on how Khayyám grapples with those huge concepts, the ones often tied to religious belief. We're talking about that chilling fear of damnation, the threats of hell, and then the flip side, that glowing aspiration for eternal bliss, the hopes of paradise.
Exactly. And it's important to stress we're not really looking for detailed theological arguments here. We're digging into how a poet, a philosopher, reflects on these massive ideas, often questioning them. And crucially, everything we discuss comes directly from the Rubáiyát text we have in front of us. No outside interpretations today.
Okay, perfect. Let's unpack this ancient text then, see what it really reveals about these big questions. We're working through excerpts from the Rubáiyát, which is, of course, famous for its deep philosophical thinking on life, fate, divinity, all of it. And the source material is organized into these main sections, marked by those triple hashes, the hashtag, tag, 10. As we go through, you'll probably notice how Khayyám seems to approach these themes from, maybe slightly different angles, or maybe builds on his earlier thoughts.
Yeah, there's a definite flow to it.
So let's kick off with that very first block of verses right at the start.
Yeah.
What immediately jumps out, at least to me, is this powerful sense of life being short. How fleeting it all feels.
Oh, absolutely.
It almost feels like he's setting the scene by just highlighting the sheer uncertainty of the future.
Yeah.
And especially what happens after we're gone.
Right.
And isn't that uncertainty, that not knowing, isn't that exactly the fertile ground where ideas of heaven and hell often take root?
It really is. And these opening lines, they don't just sort of hint at life being transient. They often question the whole journey directly. There's one verse in the source, for instance, that basically asks, why did we come into this universe? Why not knowing? And why do we leave it as wind along the waste?
Wow.
It sets a tone right away of skepticism. Skepticism towards easy answers, towards those established religious doctrines that claim absolute certainty about the afterlife.
So it's less about denying it outright.
Yeah, much less about denial and more about a profound expressed uncertainty, a real questioning.
Okay, so how does that initial stance then, that active questioning, that focus on life being this brief, uncertain flicker, how does that resonate or maybe clash with the certainties many beliefs offer about what comes next? It feels like he's challenging the very foundation that fuels both the hope for paradise and the fear of hell.
It absolutely challenges it. It forces you, the listener, to maybe reconsider where those certainties come from.
Right. Okay, now shifting gears slightly as we move into the next significant portion, the verses under that second tag block. Here we start seeing things that seem to touch more directly on paradise or maybe heavenly reward. What kind of imagery is Khayyám using here? Is he painting a picture of some distant spiritual place, or is it something else?
Well, this is what's so fascinating, and you see it especially in this section, which even has its own internal breaks, those hashtag markers. Khayyám often uses very, very earthly sensory details when he talks about paradise.
Earthly? Like what?
The text mentions things like, wine, beautiful gardens, the presence of the beloved, tangible things. Sometimes it almost feels like he's asking, isn't this moment, aren't these actual pleasures, aren't they a kind of paradise that's available to us right now?
Huh. So grounding it in the senses, not just abstract hope. Does he contrast these earthly joys with spiritual hopes then? Or are they presented more like an alternative paradise?
It feels much more like the latter in a lot of these verses. He's not necessarily saying that the spiritual paradise doesn't exist, but he's putting immense value on the immediate lived reality.
Okay.
If the afterlife is uncertain, which he keeps coming back to, then the wisdom seems to be appreciate the beauty, the pleasure of this world right now. The structure here with those internal markers, it really does feel like he's turning these ideas over in his mind, exploring the here and now as a really compelling focus.
That is a key pivot, isn't it? Away from the unknown future towards the known present. Okay, let's dive into the third section then, the third tag block. This seems to bring in the other side of that coin, the threats, the concepts that are kind of akin to hell or damnation. How does Khayyám approach the fear of judgment here, or divine consequences? What's the feeling in these verses? Is it fear? Is it defiance? Something else?
Well, the section definitely touches on those ideas of divine wrath, accountability, common themes when people talk about hell. But the tone isn't straightforward terror. It's more complex.
How so?
There are lines that you could read as grappling with the justice of that kind of judgment. For example, one verse seems to question the whole idea of being held accountable for actions if your destiny might already be written, predetermined.
The fate question again.
Exactly. It suggests as a more complicated view than just simple punishment for sinning. It questions the premise.
So this brings up a really important question, I think, for you listening. Does this text suggest that if there is some kind of accountability, it might be different from traditional divine judgment? Maybe it's centered more on the immediate realities of life, on the opportunities we have right now in this fleeting existence.
It certainly feels less focused on eternal torment in some fiery pit,
Hmm.
and maybe more on the potential regrets of a life not fully embraced now. The hell might be missing out on life itself.
Interesting way to frame it. Okay, moving through the final sections of the source material we have, the fourth hashtag tag have block and the ones after. What recurring themes are really coming through here that tie into this whole uncertainty about the afterlife? You mentioned fate.
Yes, fate, destiny, and maybe the limits of free will. Those ideas weave through constantly.
And how do those connect to the idea of deserving heaven or hell?
Well, if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, the philosophy kind of weaving through these later verses, Khayyám often comes back to the power of fate. There's that famous line in the source about the moving finger writing and having writ moves on. No pleading can change it.
Right, very deterministic.
Very. And that strong sense of destiny, it really makes the idea of earning heaven or hell through your own free will seem, well, less certain, maybe even irrelevant in his view.
So, faced with that kind of cosmic, maybe predetermined path, or at least deep uncertainty, where does Khayyám suggest we find meaning, according to these verses anyway?
Exactly that. Where do you find meaning? And his answer, again and again, seems to pivot strongly towards a philosophy of basically seizing the day, carpe diem,
Loving in the moment.
finding meaning and fulfillment in the present moment. The source material really ends with some powerful verses that emphasize enjoying life's simple, tangible pleasures, companionship, reflection, beauty. Enjoying these things precisely because the beyond is unknown and maybe even already set.
So, he doesn't dwell on the soul's ultimate fate.
Not really. Instead, the focus becomes intensely, vividly on valuing the brief reality of existence right here. It feels like a direct response to that initial uncertainty he established at the very beginning.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key insights we've pulled from this deep dive, just from these specific Rubáiyát excerpts. It seems Khayyám isn't giving us, like, theological roadmaps of hell or paradise.
Not at all.
Instead, he uses these really potent, loaded concepts almost as a backdrop, a stark backdrop against which he highlights, first, the profound uncertainty of any afterlife. Second, powerful hand of fate, or at least the question of fate.
Right.
And maybe most importantly, the compelling urgency and the inherent value of the present moment, with all its tangible sensory joys.
That sums it up well. And it's crucial to remember, as you said, these perspectives are drawn entirely from the specific text of the Rubáiyát we've explored today. We haven't brought in outside ideas.
Absolutely. Sticking to the source. So here's a thought for you, the listener, to maybe ponder as you go about your day. Given Khayyám's really intense focus on the uncertainty of the world to come, and his powerful argument for embracing the world that is here right now, what does that suggest about where we should focus our own energy? Where should we be looking for meaning and fulfillment in our lives?
It's a powerful question to leave people with.
Be sure to subscribe to Tybootha to get more videos like this to awaken the heart to light and love.